You're on the Zoom side of it.
Well, I was scolded to begin with because I was interrupting. So I'm trying not to interrupt, but I Dave sends me these, yeah, I see you over there kind of thing. So then I stop and then it's like 5 minutes later and I'm like, do you see me over here?
All right, it's 9:30. Let's go ahead and I guess we'll begin.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Jen and I are going to attempt to present today what we know to be true as of 9:30
Today.
Things that we know to be true, things that we believe to be true, and things that may or may not be true. So it kind of sounds like an intro to Bartley's Believe It or Not. Believe it or not.
Yeah.
So Jen has, amongst her many other duties and trying to get ready for budget and all the training she's attended, has taken on the task of trying to track all of the various sources of federal funds that may be coming at us, are coming at us. And so she's put together a presentation today. I'll jump in a few places, but mostly going to let Jen do most of the presenting. Glad to have the treasurer and the auditor with us, all part of the team, and the fiscal team, as we like to call it, and invite both of them to jump in at any time as members of the finance committee as well. So with that, I think we'll just jump in and turn it over to Jen to get started.
Good morning. I handed you all a packet as well as emailed it to you right before the meeting, so you have an electronic copy. I'm going to start basically talking about the first page, going left to right, trying to keep it organized that way. And I'll start with a basic overview of what we already know. We've talked about it a couple of times. The American Rescue Plan is a $1.9 trillion bill. That part, $362 billion of that is going to be state and local recovery funds to help states, territories, counties, cities, and tribal governments cover increased expenditures, replenish lost revenue, and mitigate economic harm from COVID-19 pandemic. State of Washington is estimated to receive $4.2 billion. Of that, they've already signed $2.2 billion to a COVID relief bill that is delivering $714 million to K through 12 schools, $618 million to public health, $365 million to housing, rental and utility assistance, $50 million to child care, $26 million to food banks and programs, and $91 million to income assistance, as well as $240 million to business assistance, working in Washington round 4. That application portal is open now with a deadline date of April 9th, so a very short window for businesses to apply through the Department of Commerce.
Can you give me a sense of scale, the Working Washington for the 240 million? How does that compare to the Working Washington 1, 2, and 3?
So if you go to page 3.
I won't go to page 3. I'll wait till we get to page 3.
It's all interworking, so
Okay.
flip to page 3.
Question, the numbers that they came up with, say whatever, Goldendale's got more than White Salmon, I'm assuming they divvied it out on a dollar number per person?
It's a population is formula that they have. Yes.
You don't know that
Formula off the top of my
dollar
head?
number per person?
No, I do not. So page 3 is a diagram of working in Washington grant summary to date. I don't have, Commerce doesn't have the data from working in Washington 3 loaded yet. So how many businesses per town is not on there, but working in Washington 1 had 36 businesses of $154,000. Working in Washington 2, 24 businesses, $113,000. 2 businesses were awarded the resiliency grant. Working in Washington 3 had 33 businesses for $412,000. So working in Washington has funded Klickitat County businesses in a total amount of $699,000. In addition to that, the federal level, page 4. The federal level pandemic response funding awarded $29.3 million to Klickitat County businesses and residents. Those were through various programs. Department of Defense, disaster assistance loans had $1.3 million. $816,000 was economic injury disaster loan emergency advances. $3.7 million was the paycheck protection program. Almost $33,000 was HUD assistance. $15,000 is the railroad retirements, unemployment benefits. They had an additional in there. $25,000 was the USDA. So,
sorry, going back to this sheet, working Washington 1, 2, and 3. Do some of the businesses qualify, or is it possible that the same one got 1, the same one got 2, and the same one got 3? Or once you get 1, you didn't get another?
there were some that got multiples. I don't have, well,
And this,
technically I do have that data, but it's difficult to pull out of Kayenta.
and this is only the federal or the state dollars,
That's
because
the
we
state
put our
dollars.
own money
Right,
into
right,
it as
right.
well, and so that's why you see the number changes.
Right.
We actually have a printout of what each business got, but, and it's public information, but we didn't plan to talk about it specifically today, but that information is available of to which businesses got. how
Right.
much money,
And
so.
for the record, whoever is in charge of that file, I would like to talk about that.
I have, yes, I have the federal file, so it's about 8.
Yeah, I want a copy of what we did as a county and who we gave to. So
Okay, I could do that as well.
I'm sure that will come up later.
Okay, so that's a significant amount of money that has been delivered to our county. I thought that was pretty interesting to see.
It's the blue here, is the big blue Department of Ag, or is that Department of Defense?
Department of Defense.
Okay.
So,
So that makes far more sense.
yeah, yes, that is in situ and another company.
Siri was answering your blue question for you.
Well, that was a nice effort.
Yeah. I've shut Siri off.
Okay, so with that, Klickitat County is estimated to receive $4,349,000. We'll receive that in 2 tranches. The first 50% is going to be no later than May 10th. So that'll be $2.1 million that we should receive via ACH. The second will be no earlier than 12 months after the first.
One of the things we think we know, but I
So
don't know.
this is the believe, this is the believe it side or the know it side?
Yeah, I think it's the believe it side.
We know we're getting,
Well, we
Payment
know
number
that,
1.
but there's been discussions with commissioners. I think the treasurers presented this on behalf of the finance committee. So when those funds arrive by May 10th, it's our understanding that they'll go into 125, which is under the commissioner's control. We just want to make sure that, but I think that's the general belief and understanding. I don't know if the commissioners have confirmed that or not, but that's, I think, a recommendation of the finance committee, Greg, isn't it?
I think that's what we did in the last time. I don't really know if we have.
That's all, it's like, that's always where it
I don't know,
goes.
yeah.
It was kind of the discussion that
It was
that's
a
where it should
discussion.
go.
Assuming that's the normal landing spot for things like
What we
that.
did with all
It
the.
was for the other COVID funds, yes. Nothing like it's under your control, well, all of it's under your control, but.
okay, so our cities are estimated to receive Goldendale $760,000, White Salmon $590,000, and Bingen $160,000. On that schematic, I also included our neighbors, Skamania County, $2.3 million, Wasco County, 5.1, Hood River, 4.5. The Dow City is estimated to receive 3.2 million, and Hood River 1.5 million. Our cities are going to receive their funds because their population of under 500,000, they're going to receive their funds through the state. So it'll be similar to the CARES CRA money that we received the first time. Deadline to spend the money is December 31st, 2024. The allowable
And
use,
do the cities, are they on the same schedule where they get half now and half a year from now?
I've never found that,
Okay,
so I'm not sure.
okay, I was just curious.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I didn't find anything either.
I thought I heard that on a presentation, a Zoom presentation, but I didn't see it right.
Yeah, I didn't see it. The allowable uses for the ARP recovery funds are divided up into 4 fairly broad buckets. Treasury is still working on more guidance for us regarding that. But the first one, respond to or mitigate the public health emergency with respect to COVID emergency or its negative economic impacts. Examples include assistance to households, small businesses, nonprofits, aid to impact industries such as tourism, travel, and hospitality. Those examples are intended just to clarify congressional intent. We're not limited to those. Provide government services to the extent of reduction in revenue due to the public health emergency. Make necessary investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. There are a couple guardrails set up with the bill. So states are not allowed to use the funds to either directly or indirectly offset a reduction in net tax revenue. So there's that, and no fund shall be deposited into any pension fund. And any and all local governments that fail to comply with the federal law and related guidelines shall be required to repay the federal treasury. Our requirements are to provide periodic reports, providing detailed accounting of these funds. If we don't comply with those, we will have to repay treasury as well.
So what, one of the things we learned from the last round of funding was one, that the rules change, guidance changes throughout the term of the money. One thing that's been discussed at the finance committee and maybe with the commissioners through Greg's reports is, it's probably advisable to find ways to big chunk the money from the feds that we're going to get into the county use. So for instance, if we can use lost revenue from the landfill for 2020 and 2021, which we know we can, revenue in general, but not talking about the landfill, if we can move that money in big chunks into the county's use, then you have complete discretion of how you use the money. So rather than trying to track every dollar, and for instance, if we were to say we were going to use the COVID money to cover wages, we would have to exclude the ERS because we can't make a contribution for employees into the retirement system. So it becomes very complicated. So if we can find big buckets of under these 4 headings to move the money into the county, then you can move that money. Still needs to be audited, still needs to be tracked, but it's much more discretion and on how you would use the funds at that point. So
Lost revenue and gas tax, lost revenue and landfill.
yeah.
But how much did we have down on the landfill?
Well, about 880,000 last year, I think, between 800 and around 850, let's say. And then this year, if you take, and we can project a loss forward, and we know the landfill was budgeted at roughly $1 million, I think, higher than normal in revenues. We could project that to be a loss, and there's the first $2 million, pretty close right there. So gas tax has been there. I think there was probably a significant loss of gas tax anyway, pre-COVID and then during COVID. So, but the bigger buckets we can find to move the funds legitimately from COVID use to county use, then will be easier for staff and give the commissioners much more discretion. So.
Okay, so beyond our local $4.3 million, the local assistance and tribal consistency fund will be providing $1.5 billion to public land revenue share counties. Would be those counties that receive PILT SRS payments. That money will be split evenly over fiscal year 2022 and 2023 in 2 payments. So our portion, which I still don't have that estimated amount, would be our first payment would be our portion of $750 million.
Yeah, Senator Wyden from Oregon led the effort to get that $1.5 billion for PILT counties, of which 49 of the 50 states have counties that receive PILT funding. So those counties will be dividing, that $1.5 billion, and Treasury has been tasked with developing a formula based on economic conditions, poverty, unemployment rates, household income, land value to determine. So it may or may not follow the PILT funding itself formula, which is a good segue. We commissioners probably understand PILT funding, but we're not sure everybody understands it. So even up to a small amount of money, we thought it'd be a good opportunity for those on the phone who may not know what PILT funding is. PILT stands for Payment in Lieu of Taxes. It's allowed by the government for those federal lands that are in each county that we don't receive taxes on, yet we're expected to provide law enforcement, search and rescue, firefighting, other services that we can't receive taxes. So Klickitat County has 14% public lands, and 4% of that is federal lands of which we receive PILT funding for. 10% is state-owned lands. The federal lands are the agencies are the National Park Service, U.S. Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, and the Bureau of Land Management. So 4% of the 14% we receive, I think it's $2.38 per acre. In 2020, it's 113,000.
Smoking number.
Yeah. 113,000. 113.
Very generous of them.
I'm either being heckled or supported. I can't figure out what. But and that amount has changed over the years. Last year was 113,000. It's been as high as 125,000. When the program started, I think our first check was 9,000. So that's been funded and defunded and funded and defunded, and it's an ongoing battle. Some counties, such as Skamati, have 89% state federal lands. So our amount will vary. We don't know if they're going to just give us an extra PILT payment, and use that formula, or if the only thing that qualifies is for a portion of that money is that we're a PILT county, so to speak, and that puts us into whatever the new formula is.
Do we have an idea? I used to know. I'm just trying to get on the scale of things. The previous PILT, I mean, we know what we got. What was the total funding for PILT? I'm trying to match the federal, what they did that equaled $100 and some thousand, and how does 1.5 billion equal
You're trying to see
what they
whether we got
spent?
4% of the last one.
Yeah,
Trying to do the math together.
yeah, to get us,
So,
yes.
Can I inject, because I want to make sure we don't get off base. So one thing with PILT is we apply that amount back to the taxing districts of where.
Yeah,
the
no, we know
TCA
we're
is.
not
So
getting all of
that
that.
whole big number isn't a
Doesn't
number that's coming to the county, and I just want to make sure. So the
That
number they're
whole-
talking
that
about, we're only
whole
gonna
big
get the
number,
road
let's be
fund, the
correct.
county fund, the hospital get a portion,
Right.
if there's a hospital district, or the fire district, or however. So it gets
Right.
allocated based upon our federal land TCAs to those areas.
Right.
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make
Right.
sure.
No,
Yeah,
their
that's
formula is
good.
gonna be.
Thank you for me.
Yeah.
I might be the only one here that you.
No,
want
no,
to
that's
do
fine.
that.
I just want to make sure we don't take that whole
Feel
number. and
free to
everybody-
jump up and do that all you want.
You're good.
But if they use that same formula, the money we get will not be divided amongst. So if we get additional money from the 1.5 billion because we're a PILT county, we do not have to share that with any other agency. So that money will come to us in a similar amount for 2 years. So it may be that or more or less, but it doesn't have the restrictions that PILT funding has. So it could be another 100,000 or $250,000 over those 2 years.
And that formula is also different. It hasn't been designed yet. Treasury's designing the
Right.
formula. They're determining the funding, taking into account economic conditions of each eligible revenue share county, using measurements of poverty rates, household income, land values, unemployment rates, and other economic indicators to come up with that.
Plus, I think it's always good to remind folks that 164,959 acres of Klickitat County is owned by the state or federal government, of which we receive little or no funding to cover. So, I mean, that in itself is always a good.
I will be curious. I'm not, and I don't want to get us down a rabbit trail, but it's always been, the federal lands in the county that are within the scenic area. It's always been our understanding, or their longstanding position, we don't receive PILT on that because we have chosen to, that's been one of the sticks that they've had, yeah, that they don't. And I'm gonna be curious if that gets factored in or not.
Yeah, that would be a good question.
Because that's kind of different than the normal PILT funding that they have the stick to beat us with. If they will continue to use that stick, yeah, it's our own, yeah, it's personal to Klickitat County, the stick is. Because that has been, the carrot has been, oh, but if you adopt, you'll get this PILT, an extra $2 an acre, whatever it is, for the scenic area.
Is the scenic area getting that money?
I don't know what happens to, well, it used to be, the story was, and I stopped asking, was that they were actually, it was owed to us and that they would make good on it. When we adopted, then we would get this back PILT. But there's no record, it would have to be appropriated. It's not like they're putting it in a account somewhere, a trust for us.
The
That's,
gorge commissioner is paying it though.
well, I don't know where it's,
You don't know where.
I don't think they ever had it, but the relevance is, I'll be curious again, if it goes through if this is a completely different funding formula, then hopefully, especially it's coronavirus relief dollars, what does that have to do with scenic area adoption? It has nothing, that's a land use issue.
I suspect reading the press release or the information from Senator Wyden's office, he's always been a supporter, because Oregon gets substantial funds through that. That does go to the counties, does not get divided amongst the other agencies. And Harney County gets millions because they're predominantly Bureau of Land. I think it's just his way to get additional funding to the PILT counties who've been, cut over the years, substantially cut. Those programs, it's due to expire this year if it's not renewed.
Right.
So, and NACO, which has really good information, if you want general background on PILT, it's NACO, we can get that to you. NACO has good, and they're really the leading advocates for the counties in that area. So
I talked to Tom Lannon and he said it's gonna be a huge windfall when they break out that 1.5 billion, because the SRS has been going down, down, down. And when they run the math, the expected math, it's like they're gonna get bumped back up to the good days.
it'll be curious to see if they require at least the state, because I've contacted the state PILT people in Treasury, and to see if what Greg said historically is going to be true with this additional money, or if the counties do have total discretion over those dollars. It may not be, it's not going to be $4.3 million, but it may be, additional funds that you may or may not have the ability.
Which is fair, but there's still, just like Glenwood Fire District doesn't get a lot. So if it's payment in lieu of taxes, which I get that. I'm just meaning like there is dollars to figure out where those are at, so. Well, no, I'm not. I'm just meaning like those are all.
I know that. No, it's good. It's a good point.
So are you making the argument that that if the strings aren't off, where we have to distribute by the formula, there might be a policy discussion?
I'm just meaning like you guys might want to look at that, because if we have done it that way and there's dollars that were going to a small fire district or something, those are your citizens too. And I just was making sure you guys had all the pieces to be able to, I'm not saying which way the decision should go. I'm just making sure we are looking at all the parts to make sure that that pretty soon you don't pull on this lever and later get dumped on over here by a district that's
Right, that just comes back around and says,
Right.
oh, we need help.
You know what I'm saying? That's all I'm just saying. There is other pieces to that of where.
Which is really why we're here. We're trying to give you all the information that we know to be true and think to be true. Some has strings, some has no strings. Everything's got some kind of hook to it. Either at your discretion or that you have no discretion over. And what we hope to get from you today, and this may only be the first of many discussions, is trying to get feedback from you, ultimately that we'll take back to the finance committee, is the how, the when, the whys, what are your thoughts about the funds? Should we get it, when we get it? So we hope throughout the day to start getting that feedback from you, and then it maybe set the course forward to have further discussions, so that we know as a working group for fiscal things how we can provide you the structure that you need and want when this money arrives. So, and Greg's right, and I'm glad he joined in, and that's great. A team effort.
There are very, very few parameters in regards to that payment, but the public land share payment. Eligible counties may use these funds for any governmental purpose other than lobbying. But counties has to provide periodic reports of those funds and their uses. And if they don't meet the requirements or misuse of the funds, they'll have to, the federal government will recoup those funds. Next month was some lump sum of money that's going to be coming into our county, not directly to us, but other entities within the county would be the economic assistance for business and communities. State education agencies are going to be receiving $123 billion. Of that, Washington's estimated amount is $1.8 billion. Outlined to this, and the reason I put this in here is because Education Stability Fund has outlined $3 billion for education technology, the ability to do distance learning and remote learning. Another side of that, $7.2 billion will be going to the FCC, and that $7.2 billion is for Emergency Connectivity Fund within the FCC's E-rate program, helping schools and libraries attain affordable broadband and to support virtual learning. There's a trend throughout the American Rescue Plan, and that trend is broadband expansion and infrastructure. Coronavirus capital projects. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Nope.
Okay.
Thank you.
Coronavirus capital project fund is receiving $10 billion. Of that, Washington is estimated to receive 189 million, Oregon 155 million. Those funds are for state, territories, tribal governments to carry out critical capital projects specifically related to enabling work, education, health monitoring, including remote options in response to COVID pandemic. The funding includes broadband infrastructure. So that is the general overview of the funds that I found that are going to directly affect those in our county. Yeah, go for it.
So now in the under the heading of believe it or not part of the believe it, yesterday the president released his the bill that's going to be introduced to the Senate on infrastructure, which is overall a $4 to $5 trillion bill. The first half would be focused on infrastructure at $2 billion. I'll go through this quickly because it does potentially tie back. I think conventional thoughts are something will come out of Congress in terms of infrastructure, how much and what, but I think so. Transportation, $621 billion, $115 billion to modernize 20,000 miles of highways, roads, and streets. $20 billion road safety for all users. It would fix the 10,000, the largest significant bridges and 10,000 specific smaller bridges throughout the country, of which the county has some probably. $85 billion to modernize existing transit, potentially funds for senior services. This will double federal funding for public transportation. $80 billion to Amtrak, $25 billion to airports, $17 billion to inland waterways, ports, and ferries. So we own half of an airport. $174 billion to electric vehicle market, which will by law replace 50,000 diesel vehicles and electrify 20% of all school buses. Home care services and workforce, $400 billion, manufacturing, $300 billion, housing, $213 billion, research and development, $180 billion, $111 billion for water, drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater. So those monies can flow into the county systems. $100 billion for schools, of which of that $25 billion is to upgrade and build child care facilities. So Klickitat County is part of the Child Care Coalition. We've already received a $100,000 grant, and we have the attention of our state elected folks. So I think that would put us farther up the line than other people that just have good ideas in terms of getting some of that $25 billion for daycare, providing daycare. facility, at least in Goldendale initially, 100 billion for digital infrastructure, national high-speed internet. 100 billion for workforce development, 18 billion for VA, and 10 billion to modernize federal buildings. So why are we giving you all those numbers?
You're
Broadband.
trying to make me cry, because I'm thinking what the taxes are gonna be like 10 years from now to pay all that back.
I think one of to visualize one of the things is, so you're gonna ultimately determine how you want to spend the $4 million. What types of projects, we talk in terms of buckets. What buckets are you ultimately gonna put that money in to be spent? Broadband is one of the allowable uses of the 4.3 million that we're gonna get. Broadband is in the FCC, so there'll be broadband funds flowing to all communities through that. And then there's money in the infrastructure bill that will address broadband. So
As well as the school.
So that's just one example. So when we're looking, say, boy, you ultimately want to do this, it might pay to wait to see, because there's other money coming over the next 12 to 18 months that you could fund that out of another bucket of money, therefore freeing you know what I'm saying?
Right.
So, it's not like, well, this is our one chance to fund that thing, because that thing may be funded in 2 or 3 different of these packages that are coming at us. So, and ultimately, I think we've all talked about, and I think commissioners have talked about, you see the amount of money that's going to be flowing directly and indirectly into this county, as well as the regional partnerships that already exist that have all of this money on both sides of the river. Going slow and developing a thoughtful process, the money doesn't have to be spent right away. So, waiting a little bit to see what's coming in and under different scenarios, and then, having a thoughtful process going forward is, I think, what we're all hoping to get to. And what does that look like ultimately over time? So.
Well, and I kind of, with part of that, I kind of agree with that. I don't want to start spending and earmarking money and shooting it out as soon as it gets here either. So personally, I don't mind sitting on it for a little while and thinking and determining it as we go versus earmarking it now.
Well, the fact the money's coming in, the 4.3 million is coming in 2 different payments, 12 months apart. So, if you only look at what you got, and don't.
Right, you don't have to spend it for 4 years. You don't have to spend it in 6 months.
Well, technically, we'll be spending it right then, because we're.
Right, well, we're
writing off
setting it
the land.
aside to write
So
off
we
of
can
our,
spend it in 10 years if we want.
right.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
So
Linda or Greg, anything to throw at this point?
I did some research. NACO has, like you said, NACO's fantastic. They've been spearheading this bill. They have a ton of information. They've asked other counties to submit ideas, requests, questions, so that they can reach out to Treasury to get some guidelines. So I just pulled together the general concept and other ideas that other counties were seeking, and that would be broadband infrastructure again. There are partnerships with neighboring counties and cities, as well as third parties to expand broadband, or reimbursing local businesses to provide internet to the public. Those were a couple of ideas that they had out there. Keep in mind, FCC, I did just find yesterday that FCC is announced a program to subsidize broadband and internet. So it's coming soon, they said. It's for the public to go in and apply to get reimbursement and help with the cost of internet. See, homeless housing was another one. Courthouse technology for citizens to do business online. So either e-building permits, electronic building permits, online plan reviews, e-licensing, kiosks, those types of things. Loss of revenue, obviously, we've talked about that multiple times today. Economic aid to broadband education, workforce redevelopment for remote capabilities. Hospitality and tourism development, improvement or expansion and upgrade to maintain tourism facilities. our area be camping, campgrounds and fairgrounds, those types of things. Housing assistance, small business support, which we've done in the past, food assistance, we did that as well. And purchasing updates to software equipment in order to reduce the administrative cost to monitor, track, and report the recovery funds. Better capabilities of telework and support critical healthcare services as well as other local functions. So those ideas have been out there. Treasury hasn't gotten back to NACO. I did include the NACO analysis in the back couple pages, as well as the letter from NACO to the Treasury in regards to the survey that they asked the counties to do and what they're asking of Treasury.
I think one thing we learned from the WASAC discussion, and I think Commissioner Sauter was on that call as well, is some counties are looking at a regional approach, whether it be surrounding counties, not just within their counties and all their partners, the ones that Greg's referred to, both public sector and nonprofit sector. But in regional, in our state, we have the bike, the bike state partnerships that we have. I mean, if you just look at Klickitat, Wasco, and Hood River, there's almost $17 million coming in just through this first chunk of money. So is there partnership possibilities? I don't know. Tourism, we already have a partnership with the airport. I don't know, but there's potentially internally and externally other ways to maximize the dollars if those should at some point rise to the top, being a good opportunity so that nobody's paying for all of that, but it's kind of a force multiplier, so to speak. So I think that potential may or may not exist depending on which direction you want to go. So
Do we, I could see some opportunity as far as, with the broadband question would be, housing would be another one. The concern I have with broadband is everybody's all gung ho to, that there's this need and we want to do it, but it's so technology driven that I don't want to invest a bunch of money in something that 3 years from now is obsolete and we're on to something else. And I'm thinking of the satellite system that's being installed, where we're so focused on, we got to run, fiber everywhere, which, I mean, fiber is always going to be the best. And maybe that's, one of the things that we focus on, that we get we have our fiber backbone, but we don't have it. We don't have much middle mile, and certainly not any, or to speak of the last mile stuff that's out there.
That's the main people that need it, is the last mile, and we're not going to be able to accommodate that. And so my thinking is, if we're looking at the other funds, not the main fund.
Right.
So I guess when it comes to broadband, my thoughts are fairly simple, and that is that we have a lot of people that now have access to broadband for the first time, and everybody's on the waiting list for Starlink. Some people have chosen to not get on the waiting list because they're low income, and that $600 hit is a lot of money. And so that's one of those questions with that FCC is I see on here some of that money can be used to, for broadband in use, and then it says you can work with low income and all that. One of those would be able to subsidize the purchase of the initial equipment for them, a portion of that, or is that going to go through the FCC? So my first thought is if there's so much getting poured into it, Starlink just got the authorization to, remember the cap $2? Well, they got the new tranche to include us in our area, at about $600 per household that they're going to hook up. Are they going to give a reduced amount? It's $100 a month, which is pretty close to what people are already paying for CenturyLink, with the phone line and everything. It's within $25. I don't know where we want to sit in that, but if there's a bunch of other money coming, I don't want us to jump on that bandwagon now.
Well, that's what I say. I don't know that I even want to have the policy discussion until the money's coming, until we know what's coming from where.
For my big one is there's going to be a lot of dollars that end up falling into fire, our junior taxing districts that are small districts? And can we use our dollars to leverage for them to get more? And that's the whole thing I keep thinking about is 4 million. Oh, it seems like it's nothing. I mean,
Right.
Especially with the inflation that's coming with all these big Bs,
Right.
it's gonna seem like even less.
It's now Ts.
Yeah.
That are now T's.
Yeah,
We used to
Ts.
talk about
Yeah.
B's, now they're T's.
B seem like budget dust now.
Yeah, that's dust.
So I mean, I just want to keep that, real, like, this is actually, it seems like a lot of money, but it's not.
Yeah.
Heck, well, we can spend $4 million just on one road.
Or one water line, or one,
At some point, we can talk about it today. We want to talk about it. I don't want to interrupt Jen's presentation too much, but are there discussions to be, I'll just throw that now. Are there discussions to be had, and with who and how, about what you're just talking about, maximizing funds? Is that a short list? Is it a bigger list? Is it, what's, if we are going to take, if you ultimately decide to take time and go slow, so to speak, what information gathering needs to take place with whomever that may be,
right.
to see if those opportunities, I'm trying to talk in generalities, the opportunities you're talking about exist to maximize something somewhere, so that 4 million becomes much more than that, or somebody else's gets maximized because we have the ability to,
The hard part is it depends on who you talk to. So if you're talking to a junior taxing district about, well, we're not saying we are doing, but what if we did do, they're all of a sudden gonna think, yep, we're doing it.
Yeah.
So you have to we might change our mind later. I guess my first question with the dollars per citizen thing, I want to make sure that everybody that lives in this county is getting some benefit with whatever our final choices are going to be.
And in terms of the other thing, so other than leveraging internally, my direction would be finding efficiencies. I don't know if that looks like upgrading Kayenta to something that everybody can survive the next decade in. But finding efficiencies, and whether it's, and it can be efficiencies for employees, but also efficiencies for the public. Being able to pay your bill online. Wouldn't that be nice?
Over your new broadband connection.
I saw in one document, Commissioner, you pointed, I saw in one document, a county executive in a large county in Ohio, I think it was, or Pennsylvania, said, we're going to look back in 10 years and say, what did we spend the money on? It's a once in a generation amount, most likely. And when we look back, how did we use the funds?
Right.
All these discussion points.
Right. I don't want us to be, you hear time and again of folks that win the lottery and they waste it.
Blow it all.
And they blow it all on all this stuff. So that's why I think we're kind of all on the same page that we need to take our time. There's no rush to.
I would like to take the time and use it as a multiplier on a grant project kind of thing and get the biggest bang for it.
Yeah. Well, especially because we don't know, like there's so much of the stuff, we don't have the information. Like we have only a little slice of it, the part that's directed to us. But all of these things, how is the FCC going to do stuff towards broadband? How's that infrastructure going to go? There's going to be a tie in, we did talk about, we have an airport that we have a half interest in, that there's the infrastructure, there's some of that's going to be targeted at airports. It's likely we could be successful getting something funded at the airport that maybe is on our capital list that we were trying to figure out how to pay for. So it's kind of like we can wait for the dust to settle till all of these unknowns and the numbers all fit in there so that we could make an informed decision about where do we use our part that we have discretion over? Because this other stuff we may be able to advocate for and push for, but we don't have the say on it. And let's keep our powder dry as far as what we can fill in the spots where we will be successful with some of it. I think we are likely gonna get stuff funded that's, that we want to get funded through these other things. Some of it we're not, or we may have to fill some holes.
Or may all have different strengths. Is it competitive? Is it, limited?
So,
And back to your grant comment, so NACO has posed the question to Treasury of whether these funds can be used as match for grants, so.
right.
Right,
we
well,
could
that was
address
my
that.
thinking is even if it isn't these funds and we just take landfill losses and whatever, funnel that into the reserves and we sit on it for 5 years and we use that money to match something in 5 years from now. We only really have to spend whatever we can't suck
Right.
out of there now.
And-
And
And it-
even on that, I would like that money that we have to spend, we still have 4 years to spend it. I'd like to see what all these other programs do. So we're not earmarking our stuff for something that the other program would have covered.
And additionally to that, the question of using the funds to offset public safety's wages and public health wages. That's in there again, the question's out there. Hopefully that goes back to us, because that would fill in the rest really. And I personally would stay away from public health because their wages are tied into other grants. It's really complicated. There's strings on that, but Sheriff's Office.
One thing that we probably can assume is true is the 4.3 million. The county, once it's in our system, you'll have the most discretion. All of these other funds through FCC are all either going to be funded through the state, a federal agency, a specific program. They're all going to have strings attached to them of some kind.
Yes. We see those weekly, the 80-page grant documents for,
$20 grant.
well, usually a little more than that. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, sometimes it's not, it's like, I think the paper costs more than we're getting out of this.
This is a good segue into, I found yesterday, I stumbled across this week anyway. Aside from the FCC subsidy that I stumbled across yesterday, I found a mental health grant for jails, local jails. Deadline is April 12th on that, for that application. Also, PUD called me first thing Monday morning and said that they saw that we were awarded $80,000. I said, what are you talking about? So did some digging. It is another community development block grant. It's the same as the CV1, only it's a CV2. So that was originally a pass-through grant that public health, that went through public health and went to WAGAP. So this is the same. It has an application deadline of April 30th. We weren't awarded it. We're eligible for $125,000 split with our county and Skamania County. That first one was extremely labor intensive for Aaron. So that would be a good opportunity for that grant committee that.
Is it a grant match or is it just here's your money?
I can't speak to the specifics of the CDBG and exactly what that would entail. I do know that we have to monitor.
I think
and
it's a grant, but there's huge reporting requirements
Yes.
with that money. So,
And the reporting
so it's not
requirement
free.
falls on us,
Right.
and all the money gets sent to like.
And
WAGAP.
we're not, right, we're a
not the-
pass through.
So, yeah, we're the pass through, but we're doing all the reporting.
Exactly.
And we have the audit liability because of all the reporting.
So is the $79,000, that's our portion, worth
Yeah.
it? That's one of those things.
That's also true for the 4 million. The 4.3 million is, I was reading parts of the guidance we're getting is if ultimately you decide to share some of this with a nonprofit or another agency, Klickitat County is ultimately responsible for how that money is spent and would be the one who would have to pay it back should it be determined somewhere down the road
That it was misspent.
because typically the rules follow the money in this case, and so sometimes when you spend it, they change the rules. But ultimately, Klickitat County is going to be beholden for any money that gets passed through. They're pretty clear about that, this bill.
Back on the PUD thing, I know I'm recorded, so they'll bring it up later and scream at me. You guys know I'm not a big fan of county money going to the PUD. I question whether that's a gift of public funds to a private corporation. But also, I keep hearing on the radio constantly where there's money out there for anybody behind in their electric bills and past, future, it's on the radio all the time, how they are not turning their people that are past due onto this program so they can pay their bill, and then they wouldn't be calling us for a handout I don't understand that, but I'm a no on handouts with PUD.
I think some of the frustration that the PD is having or challenges is, they're not a direct recipient of these funds. So for instance, WAGAP is, also receives a lot of the funds for these kinds of assistance. And I think the county's good partners with WAGAP, and Leslie gave a report not too long ago, I believe. And, they're with us on the child care initiative, but there is so much money coming that the smaller agencies like WAGAP are just literally getting buried. And we, to some degree, will be feeling the same kind of, but the volume of funds coming to every entity in every state is overwhelming. Will be overwhelming some of these smaller entities. So it kind of creates a backlog until people can figure out, like we're trying to figure out.
Well, and I guess I'd say with like WAGAP's going to get a ton of funding through a ton of different places. That do they necessarily need more of, say, this one? Where if you look at other nonprofit organizations that we can funnel money to, there's a church over here in Goldendale that's going to start a youth center, kind of like the deal in White Salmon. But for someone like that, $79,000 would be absolutely huge. Something to think about.
And then before I lose track of it, the whole grant issue, I know Greg's brought that forward a number of times. The finance committee's talked about it a number of times. I think the grant committee will provide a lot of information to the commissioners, in one place, so that we can see all of these different, are there grants that we're getting $80,000 and spending $79,000 in administrative overhead to manage? Are there, that spread over 27 different departments, but having a grant committee have that information centralized, not necessarily as an oversight group, but as just a clearinghouse for all of the information, as well as new grants that come in as a feedback source before it gets to the commissioners. I think, and you've heard this before, I think we all think that's going to be a positive thing and a good thing for the county to have that information available.
I wish we had a county list of C3 nonprofits.
Do we?
I'm sure we have the ones we know and work with all the time, but I'm sure there's a heck of a list out there beyond those that don't even know these
So
funds
specifically,
are
you're
even
looking
available to be asked for.
at nonprofits that are legal nonprofits.
Legal nonprofits that could qualify for funding that don't even know funding's out there.
We can look around. I'm sure that list must exist somewhere. The state has to, if they're a legal nonprofit, then.
I mean, it's kind of the same thing with our tourism dollars. There's legal nonprofits that don't even know that they can fill out an application.
We can look and see if that exists somewhere. I think the state probably most likely tracks that in the corporate, whatever agency.
Community outreach, I guess. And when we do spend the dollars or decide where we want to spend the dollars or how we want to spend the dollars, hopefully there's some community outreach there too, to get community input before we decide. Personal opinion.
Buy a quarter of that building down.
Knock out a wall and expand it.
Well, and this might be a good segue. You have additional things you want to talk about before we segue?
Nope.
I will be curious before we move off the nonprofit. I'm not opposed, but I just want to have really clear understanding of who's eligible and who's not.
Right.
There's a lot of nonprofit, and maybe it's my, we have always been, you can't give public money to, even private nonprofits. They have to be, and if they're now eligible because of this, then I need some really clear guidance and assurance, because there's a lot of nonprofits Because if you, depending on what the criteria is, there may be people, because you're not getting a briefcase full of cash that you can reward. Oh, I like you, here's some money. Oh, I don't like you, you can't have it. You have to have clear criteria of what, because it's still public money.
Right.
And I can't pick winners and losers of people that I like or don't like. And so you're gonna have a set of how do we select these? What's the, and it's, it's always been easier. It was only public entities. And so, school districts, fire districts, things that have the public, you're just transferring, it's public money that you're giving to the public.
Yeah.
I don't share my seatmates' concern over PUDs. I don't think they're private corporations. I think it's in their title. They're a public utility district. I own part of it, as does anybody that's in the county. But we have a difference of opinion, and I don't.
But to your point about the money, I like to make the implicit, explicit when we can. All of this money is public money.
Right.
Federal, state, county money.
Right.
Wherever it winds up, if it winds up in the county bucket, if it comes through, no matter where it goes, it always is public funds. And ultimately, I don't know if the PA's on the phone, we'll have to have an agreement with any agency, public or private, that we fund. And the audit requirements in Brenda's area are going to require, and ultimately the law specifically says that whoever gives the money out will pay it back if somewhere down the road it's determined that it didn't follow your criteria that you mentioned of,
because the money that was given to us that we're delegating to somebody that we're passing through to somebody else, they're acting as our agent, is the way I look at it. And ultimately we're responsible. And so that's what I just want to be really
Right, but
clear.
that's what WAGAP does for us on a lot of fronts too.
And
There are pass through to get it.
So, and speaking of reporting, just
Yes, go ahead.
so that you're aware, yesterday, it was noted that periodic report would be at least quarterly. So that would be that administration.
Yeah, thank you. What I wanted to point out about the audit is if we have a finding, a federal finding, we do not have a clean audit report, of course, and every time we get one of those, it's kind of a black mark, making us be high risk depending on the dollar amount involved in the finding. So then we're a high risk audit for a couple more years until we get off of that. So it's very important to document this and get it all down correctly. We have had a couple of federal audit findings in past years, but it's been a long time now. I'd like to keep it that way.
Right. And just from a totally practical standpoint, of course, it's bad to be a high risk, but it costs more because our audit
Absolutely.
costs go up because they're really digging. It's more than,
They're
oh,
required.
we're just going to look here and we're just going to pull a few samples. If you're high risk, they're pulling a lot
They pull
more,
a lot more grants. to
and we
audit,
pay
too.
for all of that.
Right, because the dollar threshold for the number of grants that they audit or the amount of, grants they audit is bumped up. And like last year, I think we just had them, I think it was last year, we just had one because Road had such a huge grant and we met that qualification because we're low risk.
Right.
We want to stay there.
Well,
It can.
Or what?
bond ratings, if we have.
What if we went out to the debt market? I mean.
It's basically our credit
Yeah.
report.
It's our credit report.
Yeah, yeah.
They're
And
like,
when
oh,
I-
you're not a good steward, so you're gonna pay more in auditing, you're gonna pay more in interest rate because
And
you're
it
a higher
affects
risk.
Not only your bond rating, but it would also affect your compliance to any debt that you have issued.
Right.
And also, every year, I'm required to, I should say, provide a copy of the entire audit report, and including findings, if there's any, and the management letter, if it's made public, to the insurance company when we renew our, we have some policies that renew every 3 years, and then we have the public officials that are every single year. And every single year, I have to give a copy of that to the insurance agency, and it bumps the rates for the insurance for the public official bonds up.
So it's all a good reminder that right now we're faced with ultimately, or you're faced with as commissioners, what do we spend it on? How do we spend it? Once those decisions are made, I like to use the term buckets, once you've kind of identified the the buckets that this money sits in or goes through. Then it involves the PA's office, because each money that leaves the county and goes to somebody else will have to be in agreement drafted with the PA for that legal review. The audit requirements still exist. We're still responsible no matter who it is. And so right now we're faced with the who, what, where, when, but as you identify those buckets, there's a lot of work that follows that, involving a lot of departments to make sure that it's spent appropriately in all of the issues and the unintended consequences, the bond ratings, the county's audit. I mean, it's gonna be years. We'll be long after the money's spent. We'll be dealing with some of these other issues over the next 4 or 5 years, probably.
Yeah, Jake.
So I guess my first question is, speaking about efficiencies and audits and preparing and reporting, what are you looking at that will help you make things better, easier for all of that?
The departments are going, because we don't have a grant management department, will have to monitor their own grants and make sure that they have all the necessary documents and timely provide their schedules 15 and 16 to the office so that we can provide them. Hopefully next year I'll have an accountant or provide them to Teresa. If we're in this place next year, I don't know. But yeah, they need to be on top of it, documenting everything and keeping copies of their A-19s, which is their request for money. In this case, we already have the money, so for this federal grant that they just talked about, we won't have A-19s, but to document every invoice and give us copies of that so that we have it for the audit report to back up our grant schedules when we file our annual report.
The grant committee may be able to assist your department with providing that reminders to departments and
Yep.
helping you.
Maybe.
That's what I was thinking, is maybe they can be the,
Well, I think that's the goal of the grant committee, is to try to generate that list more than once a year at the end of the year. So I think the goal and the whole, what we found worked last year when we were getting the money and having to do everything, was having a group that was an advisory group really to help and facilitate and keep those things at the top, kept everything rolling. So I think that's the idea that we've talked about, is trying to get that group together and get some reports that are coming to know what the grants are that are either coming in, what have we applied for, and trying to put some rubrics together to evaluate them all correct, or, for you guys. And this is all tools for you guys, because they would not be that group, but they could help, because there would be a knowledge base across there. And so that we're not looking at this list once a year, which would hopefully help Brenda, because we would be able to see it on a regular basis.
Brenda's deputy would be on the committee, hopefully.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
The committee would be the chief deputy, or it would be an auditor person, a treasurer person, the physical manager person,
Physical?
Physical, sorry.
Really?
Always do that, like,
Facilities?
calling it.
Anyway, guess I'm here.
PE teacher.
Start at 5 minutes. And then, now I'm off.
HR.
HR, right.
And then
And-
PA's office.
And then, since the grants go through the PA's office, they could advise that group if there was any questions or, whatever, to try to piece their reports together, so that then would be presented to the board in somewhat of a regular basis. I don't know that weekly is it's too close, but at least quarterly or something, so at least everybody's seen it more than just at the end of the year or
Public
in the
Works.
financial report.
Public Works would be the fit.
Yeah.
Public Works.
Public Works would have a representative.
Well, do we think my perception is that, we did this last year, we're doing it now, and it, for the most part, was pretty successful. I mean, we had a lot of new grants that flowed in because of all of this stuff. I guess we'll find out when the annual
Well-
report's put together and the auditors come,
So Teresa,
how we did.
Yeah, Teresa and her group haven't started really reviewing our schedule 15 and 16, which is 15 to our state grants and 16 to the federal grants.
Okay.
So when they start reviewing those,
We'll get a report card on how we did.
Yeah, sure, she'll let me know.
So I guess where I was attempting to go with that was in terms of like upgrading Kayenta to become more efficient. I wish that we can get to being far more paperless in the future. state, federal governments, we're all trying to go paperless, and I hope that we're pushing that envelope as well. And if we can use monies to become more efficient, to save that, because that's how everything's going.
What are we, completely off topic, but since you brought up Kayenta, are we planning on keeping Kayenta, or is it only here for a year or two until we change something?
We hope not. I mean, we're gonna come back with a recommendation, but the recommendation is to replace
Yeah.
it.
That's what I thought.
Something else.
Can I
Well,
get
that's
a
what I'm
roll
saying,
call?
if we're putting more money in it to make it streamlined, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense if we're planning on replacing it anyway.
And I would say, I know we don't want to get into talking about, which buckets we want to create.
Right.
But I would say on my list of things that I would probably advocate for is that update to the financial system for the efficiency. And I'm not saying, I mean, I think we've all kind of come to the conclusion Kayenta is not going to be in the running as one of the ones that were, but I think that's, now we don't know yet.
That's my vote. My vote is no.
So when is the plan to update or / replace Kayenta? What are we thinking? What year is that on the list to?
Steering committee really hasn't gotten there.
It can take a couple of years.
It's gonna take probably a solid year to 18 months
Yeah.
from just information we've gathered from other counties and up to 24 months. I mean,
Right.
the process of doing financial systems is not a quick one.
So, but that's the window we're looking at.
So the
It
bucket
would
of
take
money we're
18 to
talking
24.
about is
Depending
either
to-
to fix Kayenta or replace Kayenta. That's the bucket we're talking about.
Well, we just.
I think everybody's on the, there's no fixing.
We
Right.
just technically tried to fix
Decidable
Kayenta.
days.
I didn't wanna.
Yes, presuppose, because we have not actually
Right.
come to that, but it's Kayenta's died of old age,
Well,
or it's
the other
dying
thing
of old
is
age.
too, is that we don't have the real version of Kayenta because it was kind of cobbled together to start with back in the 90s when it was SFG, and so now we can't just, long story.
And
What kind of dollar
Commissioner,
number are we looking at for that?
The estimate is $1 million to $1.2 million
Okay.
for the full, with the new system and then the conversion, I was gonna say the translation, although I think there's gonna be a lot of translating going on.
I could be easily persuaded into that bucket.
I always go back to this because I've done payroll for a million years, but we as a county still fill out paper timesheets.
Yeah.
That's 20 years ago that
Right.
became obsolete everywhere else, so.
Yes, there's an example of what.
I just want to throw that out
And
there.
then that paper comes in, he physically moves through, comes in here for a physical signature
Yes.
well, to Commissioner Anderson's point,
or to directors.
you can replace Kayenta, but if you don't upgrade the processes,
Yeah, it's not.
then you're gonna wind up with a new software that's still working off 1970s and 80s processes. So the one thing that
Right.
everybody seems to agree, whether they all agree or not on Kayenta, they all seem to agree. We
Well,
have
not everybody agrees.
very inefficient processes that involve a lot of paper.
Who's on the call?
I
So-
know a lot.
And that's,
Nobody looked.
you know, and that work can start anytime.
We're okay.
That work doesn't have to wait for a new software.
It is.
So time has evolved because.
So you
before
can, sorry, you can upgrade like he's talking about and then roll that into something new?
Well, it has to,
Or are we
Any
throwing
good
money
at the
into a
same
pot that we're
time.
not
any
using?
good consultant that's gonna bring on the software is gonna tell you, you need to look at your processes. You know, otherwise you're just putting an 8-track into a CD player. Trying to anyway, and so,
It can be done. We've done it.
That's right. but it's a parallel track and it doesn't necessarily, I think,
It also has an LP player on the side.
we've all kind of talked about this, and I think we're all in agreement, that process doesn't necessarily, maybe shouldn't wait for Kayenta for a new software. There's a lot of processes that can be reviewed within departments, across departments, that can be reviewed and looked at and, you know, made more efficient now. It'll have to happen when you get a new software, correct? And some of it may or may not need to wait till that point, some may, but that in itself is a parallel track that's an immense amount of work. Otherwise,
Right, my question is essentially, are we redoing something now and retraining somebody to a new thing now? And then if we switch in a year and a half, that all gets switched again.
Yeah, well, I'm talking about in processes internally, you guys jump in, you got more knowledge than I do about how the paper flow, how does a process get approved, where does it get approved? At the college where I was at, it's a similar sized budget, twice as many employees. The entire PO system, the entire process was electronic. Everything was approved. It started with the person buying it, went to the next level, wound up at the CFO's desk, AP guy. I mean, it was all electronic, the entire process was, and there was virtually no paperwork. That's a generational jump, but I think ultimately trying to look at each process, payroll, you can take and break it down into 100 pieces, but payroll, where should it start? How should it flow? And does it need to involve paper? So looking at a process isn't necessarily training folks on a new way of doing things. It's preparing for the new software to.
And I think the other part of that is we have a lot of long-term employees too, who maybe don't know what's out there either. So what goes back to that needs to be parallel because, okay, here's what we have available. This is what you can get to now. Let's look at your processes to get to that point as well.
Well, go ahead,
So
Madam Auditor.
I'm pleased to see that through the years, times and attitudes have changed because 4 or 5 years ago, I came to the board and I asked about going to electronic time and attendance. There was a program that Klickitat had with their Kayenta and it was not well received. And so it didn't happen. And I'm pleased that we're moving in a different direction now.
You know, and I
Well,
know,
what's going to be important, and I've said this, and at the steering committee, is I'm really supportive of us, whatever system we end up with, that we adapt our processes
Right.
to that system rather than try to adapt the system to
To our
what we
process.
want to
Exactly.
We
do.
need to move out of the Stone Age.
Yes,
Right,
right.
because that's
Yes.
what we've done, is that we have the old way we've always done it, we have new products, and it's like, you still want to use paper? Oh, okay, so how do we make this thing that's not designed to do that anymore, still do that? And that's just across the whole spectrum. of
And I want to
things.
keep in mind, have this in your thoughts, that it is very rare to find one system that is going to be able to meet everybody's
right,
needs. Okay, so just as long as we understand that.
Right.
Public Works, for one, is inventory based. Everything that goes through Public Works is assigned an inventory number, and the inventory is assigned to a job, the employee is assigned to a job. So that is a way more complex system on their end of things that the rest of the county doesn't ever see or have an idea of.
One thing I want to have, and I don't understand, I want to get them what they need as far as if it's its own, because we've had discussions about it, its own kind of standalone, because they are different.
That rolls up.
Right, that rolls up, but I also want to be sure that they're doing only what they need to do, not necessarily what they want to do.
Right.
As far as the same thing, it's like, oh,
Efficiency.
we've always done that.
Yes.
Do, like you just said, everything's assigned, everything is, if that is what needs to happen, then they need to do it. But I think sometimes it's hard to relook at things and say, well, wow, this paper timesheet is just, whoo, this is so cool. We have to keep it. And
Going back to clarify, going back to clarify what I said before about I don't want to spend all the money right away. I still believe that, but if there's something like this that's been put off for so long, I don't want to spend the money on things that are going to be new recurring hits to our budget. That later we're not going to have it. So I really don't want to do that. I want to do one-offs if possible. This being a perfect one-off to not wait 4 years to figure out what we want to
but in
do.
terms of waiting, Greg, you guys that are on.
It'll
the
be,
video,
right, it's-
you probably wouldn't have an initial payment for a year anyway. It takes time to get a new system in place.
Right,
So
that's
so
what I'm saying.
the
So I don't want to, I
Have
don't, for
consulting.
Yeah,
for
exactly.
something like this, I don't necessarily say, no, just put you off. We're going to sit on this money for a while. If we think that, this is a perfect time to do it, because, it's a good chunk and it's not a recurring kind of thing, then, me, I don't kick the can down the road, let's get the ball rolling kind of thing.
So didn't we spend a fair amount of time, a fair amount of money going through the lean process? And all of the things that we're talking about today are what I would expect should have came out of the lean process, and we should have had how we're getting to become more efficient and fix these processes coming out of the lean.
Before my time.
So
That
we
wasn't
went
part
through
of
it
it.
for payroll,
Yeah,
and we said what we wanted, but it wasn't feasible financially at that time, so, we would need to probably look at that again, because, again, time has gone by. Been a couple years or more since, it was right after the remodel, maybe 3 years, is that right? Yeah, so, but to your point about if you're talking about electronic time and attendance, Dan, my concern would be is if we put the money out for something like that, and then the system we chose didn't integrate with that, then that is gonna be money that's just gone.
Wasted, and that's my point. If we're gonna change, don't throw any money out now.
Well, I
Let's
just
change.
was saying, if that's what you were speaking about,
Right.
there's a possibility that whatever would be purchased I'd love to go tomorrow. if
For a
we could,
temporary-
But if it's going to fit with whatever is chosen in the end.
Which I think that's.
Well, I would
that's the
go, if I
importance
can,
of it.
if I can go to, back to, as far as, yes, you're absolutely right. These are things that can be, should be, have been discussed and modified through the lean process. But lean is not, at least the way I've seen it implemented, it's not, it's like department by department, it's a specific, we've only had certain departments and certain processes, and we have made efficiency. I know back and Lee can speak to it, she and Chris, her predecessor, I know we did go through, they participated in it, and we did change some processes in the
Or
commissioners.
HR.
Like I can think of one that comes up, and it was like, why are we doing this? Was it used to be every single travel authorization for every employee, it was generated a piece of paper that had to come to the board, and we had to physically sign off, all three of us, on every one of those. And we looked at, we were like, why we approved travel, the budget, the department or the elected is responsible for making sure they stay in that budget. Why am I? And when we looked at the amount of money, if you took all the, because travel sometimes can be a lightning rod for people outside that were, jetting off, I know, in our private jets places.
Yeah.
And so, but when we looked at the amount of time and effort that was going into us, it was really a tiny amount of money that we had this huge, so we got rid of that. We didn't do that anymore. And that was one thing that came out. There was a bunch of stuff, but that was one process that came out.
And I don't think lean was focused on the fiscal efficiency piece of which every department has a role. I know HR looked at HR pieces, and obviously commissioners looked at that, but I don't think everybody that had a key role in finance, and some more than others, said, how are we gonna, have more efficient fiscal systems, how we process paper and POs and invoices and all that kind of stuff. And one more comment I'd make on the software, it sounds like you're all on the same page, and there's people in the room that know much more about Klickitat than I do. Every time you take a new piece of software and you make it custom to the way you do things, you give the owner of the software, you give the company, the vendor, well, it's not really ours anymore, you've customized it.
Right.
And then when they
You're
do
gonna pay
it,
for
the
it every
client
year.
upgrade was horrible because it had to fit how we do things and not you assume software, a lot of the things we do are done all across the country by millions of employers, public and private. So, so these vendors generally have the way it's generally done, and everybody has a little twist to it, but every time we customize it, make it our own, it's not.
So we had a Klickitat committee or something, I would say, when you looked at this a few years ago. Is there one now, or was that just kind of put on hold and we'll fix it eventually?
There was a Kayenta support team.
Well,
The
but I
support
think
team
I
was
don't know that
the
the support
decision.
team is what they're talking about.
Yeah.
He's talking about the steering. committee.
Steering,
Right.
right.
And so the steering committee was started, and we had meetings, and then it was determined that we would do this upgrade to 9 or 10 or whatever.
Which was gonna be temporary.
And it was gonna be temporary,
So they had
and
to
that got
keep
put
it
off, so
breathing.
it's been a year, and that committee has come back and started meeting again.
Right.
And so we are had our third meeting maybe. because we recognize that there needs to be some recommendations coming forward, and I would say that we've had good discussion, and we're narrowing down to what the next steps are.
Who's on that committee?
When the board met, in 20, I think 18 was it?
It was
Brenda?
19.
19, it was decided that it would be the treasurer, the auditor, the board chair at the time, which was Dave, and Gordy.
Yeah, and the thing is, when we met in July of 19, we didn't meet again until this year.
After the upgrade, yeah.
Because we decided that the upgrade's gonna be in November of 19. So we're just gonna wait and meet after the upgrade and see how it goes. In fact, we didn't get the upgrade till November, we went live November 9th of 20. So.
There was something that happened in March of
Oh,
20.
maybe
Minor-
COVID,
minor
maybe,
thing.
yeah. Yeah.
That sort of derailed everything.
but I'm
We took
just
a 1
saying-
year
Was-
But it got
pause.
derailed early.
I just wanted to
I
make
know.
sure there was still a committee,
Yes,
still
we're
looking,
meeting.
still planning,
It's more of a
That
still
last
thinking
Monday.
about making a recommendation.
Yes, we're gonna come back.
Okay, question. So Jen asked, you had a good point, and I had the same question. Wet signatures, is it RCW, is it policy, is it staff? Why do I have to have a director in White Salmon drive up to Goldendale to sign their timesheets when they could just e-sign it, docu-sign it, and email it over?
We don't have a policy for one in place, and I believe there's a meeting that Jeff has set up for us to look at that.
We're meeting with DocuSign.
And until we have a policy in place and all of that, and the actual software to do it, that's an audit issue. And they don't have to drive up here, they can mail it to us. That's not a problem.
But in
But
general.
you don't believe there's any, like, I can't imagine there's no problem in it. If I can mortgage my house with an
Right.
We just
e-signature.
don't have the
But you
policy
don't
and
have-
software in place.
You don't
We
have,
don't have a county policy to support
right,
audit.
you don't have the software or the policy. We have to have
Right,
the
right, I
policy.
get that,
So
but that's
the issue.
that's something that we
Right.
control
They
and
did
can
adopt a
fix that.
resolution. But the Heather brought forward.
We
the
did.
finance.
That's what I thought, we did.
Right, so you have a resolution about that. Then we looked into softwares and Jeff has set up a meeting with DocuSign, because it's an expense, so we haven't budgeted in.
Right.
How you roll it out.
That's like, what happened to Lee?
I'm like, what did the
She was
people
beamed
just
out of
want?
here.
I honestly
Yeah,
don't care if you have to
aliens again.
docu-sign it. I don't care if you're taking, turn it into a picture and you draw on it on Photoshop. I mean, your signature is your signature. If somebody ever wants to, forge it, anybody can. It's not difficult. But the fact of the matter,
So to your point, there is a policy, there is a resolution, we're looking into a vendor, we'll come back with the cost.
Yeah.
And the meeting with the vendor is how, if we choose them, how it gets rolled out. So,
Yeah.
and how it gets used and when it gets used,
It's in the works, it's not there yet.
Because not everything needs to be docu-signed, and there is a cost for every document that is signed, and maybe ultimately all of it gets docu-signed, but you generally want to start with the departments that have high volumes of necessary signatures, and then ultimately it rolls out to the whole organization. But, there is a cost and there is a process, and we're in that point right now.
We're moving out of the Stone Age, Jake. It sounds good.
Slowly.
Well, and
you could
ultimately,
use.
there's not that many departments that aren't providing us with wet signatures. They're still emailing us their timesheets, and we're working with it. And then they follow up with their originals. And there's only a few departments that there's some issues with, and we're following up with them. I'll leave it at that.
One of the reasons we're looking into it is there is many other softwares out there. DocuSign seems to be the most common. A county that Greg talks to on a regular basis, our IT found out that when they rolled out e-signatures, their vendor didn't tell them it was per signature, and their first bill was far above what they thought it was going to be. So,
People were just.
we want to make sure we understand
Signing
that
everything.
we push DocuSign.
Let me initial that.
We put
The
DocuSign.
contract.
So we're trying to make sure that we get something that's efficient and affordable and does all the things we need to do, and no surprises are in it. So Jeff.
But think how much money we're gonna save in our productivity.
Yeah, exactly.
Cost of lumber, paper's gonna go
What's
$3 a sheet.
No, I mean, they don't have to drive up here from White Salmon. They can mail it to us. West District Court does it every single pay period, all of their AP. They scan it, they send it to us, and then they put it in an envelope and mail it to us.
But there's probably 100
done
other
that for
examples
years.
of wet signatures.
That's fine, but it does take somebody time to scan it,
Oh,
do all
exactly.
the stuff,
Yes,
put it in the
that's-
thing.
that's
I
true.
hate doing all that. I hate that stuff. It's
Trip
like
to the post
busy
office.
work.
So again, though, if it's scanned, emailed to you, it goes back to the paper. You need that original wet for the audit because it's not good enough.
Yeah, well, right now we have the resolution to cover us, but if we're gonna go to that on a permanent basis, we have to have a policy, a written policy in place.
For accepting
How to use it, when to
electronic
use it.
Yeah,
or,
right,
How to
or
use it, when to use it.
yeah.
But do you need to, I mean, that's one thing, but are you required to have a physical piece of paper for every one of those in your files
Yes.
for the audit,
Yes.
with or without a policy? So like we make a
I
policy,
get
it
one
says,
signature right now in everybody's timesheet.
but if we
Folder.
do we have the ability to say you don't have to do that anymore if we put that in the policy, or is your
Once
state
there's-
audit requirements require you have
My
to have it?
understanding, which I would have to verify, is that if we have a digital signature policy on file, they come in and audit to our policies, and if we're following the policy, we're okay. Now, I can verify that, but.
Getting her wound up, Dave.
Well,
No,
that's
I'm
all
just
right.
trying, no, I'm trying to be very clear about it, because
Right.
evidently I haven't,
Well,
I'm being too vague.
I had it.
Okay,
We will develop a policy. That's, I think, part of what we're working on. So
Yes, and-
social media, we're working on all the pieces. That could, yeah.
yeah, so when the state auditors come in to audit us, that's what they look at. They look at our policies. If we're not finding our policies, or if they find we're not following our policies, we get a management letter or a finding or something on that order.
I mean, I just think that if Greg had the ability. to
I
do
still though,
anything,
what I want to understand though is that like you have record retention requirements that we can't just make a policy that says, oh, you don't have to do that.
Right.
anymore.
Right, correct.
That's the part we can have. I totally understand them auditing to our
Oh, for
policy.
record retention purposes?
No. I mean, just in general speaking, is this one of those issues that can we make a policy that said, you don't have to have a wet signature
I believe
on
so.
a thing? Okay.
Yeah, I believe so.
and then in the end though, somebody has to print it out and we have to have,
Well, now that, I'm not sure if we can have folders digital folders and just
Right.
be done with it. That's the whole point of the electronic time and attendance, is you don't have any paper.
Right.
that's the
Mhm.
goal.
We're trying to get to.
I
Right.
know.
But I want to make sure that it's still like, everybody e-signs it, it gets up to you guys do your thing, and then you have to print it
Print
out.
all out, put it in
And
a
then
Oh,
put it in a
folder,
folder.
Depends, yeah, I'll have to look at, I don't think we have to have that.
and then
but
we buy you another
digital
vault somewhere.
policies. No.
To
that's-
store
I-
We
timesheets
just buy
back
another
to
terabyte we just get another
1924.
terabyte of storage.
I
Yeah.
imagine
So like Google keeps expanding in the Dalles, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, you're welcome.
Thank you.
with the numerous electronic time and attendance software that I've used in the past, you sign in with a secure login, password, thumbprint,
Yay, more of
whatever.
that stuff.
Sign in, that's where you enter your time, you clock in, you clock out. Road guys can clock in from their cell phone as long as they're within X amount of feet from the building type of situations. And then, electronically, it's approved by the supervisor, same with leave, any paid time off and sick leave, all that kind of stuff. So I imagine that those electronic sign-ins with password secure sign-ins are replaces the signature.
Yes,
One of the last employers that I worked at, 300 employees had apps on their phones that they could look at their W-2s, they could look at all their previous time cards, they could look at their vacation and sick leave balance. It was real-time information linked back to the time and attendance software. They can make changes to their emergency contacts. They can change some information.
I have real time, now I just call Brenda.
Yeah. Well, and that
thank
cuts
you.
down on,
Yeah, trusted me.
that also cuts down on administrative costs out of her office
Right.
because town supplies, because when it's available like that, you no longer have to mail out the W-2.
Right.
You don't have to mail
If
out
they lose
check
it, they get a new
stubs
copy,
or
yeah.
anything like that. So,
Okay,
And that'll be a
It
money
should
saver
cut
because we pay.
employee labor time doing all that
Yes.
crap too.
So if you take that one process and do what you just said, multiply it by
Yeah,
50 other processes that over time we can make more efficient, it adds up.
It's gonna be a huge savings overall.
So in the time we have remaining,
Back on
Sorry,
topic.
continue back.
we would,
Good topic though.
no, excellent, Tom. It's our
Well, it's
time.
made these steering committees work easier because our recommendation was gonna be, we need a new system and we think this money would be a really good thing to spend on it because it's a one-time and it will increase efficiency in the long run. It's an investment.
Now you can focus on who we're writing the check to.
Well, and which is kind of what we want to segue to, kind of pan out, so to speak, is, so that's one example, a good example. Sounds like you're all, there's going to be a bucket called software somewhere, an associated cost. I guess first, is there a process, do you want a process to vet out where the money goes? I mean, do you want another meeting where you start doing whiteboard discussions and saying, hey, how do we get to where, guys, help me out. How do we get to where you're going? I don't know yet. Stick with
Do you
me.
want to go old
You're
school,
back.
bring out a
Yeah.
whiteboard? throw
How do you
out ideas on
decide
the
which
board,
bucket
put
you
in
want to put the money
buckets?
into? And is there a process to help you determine that? Or is there a process or procedure you want to put in place with internal partners, meaning within the county, nonprofits and public sector, or regional, one or the other or both, to help you determine over a time frame which buckets you put money in and how you determine how much and where?
Sorry, I was looking to see if
I
the,
thought you were throwing up at me, man, I'm really upset.
no, I was looking to see if the
Oh.
big get-togethers out here.
Out here.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, let's go.
I can't imagine it is. This solar or having another.
Not, where is it supposed to be?
They always do it at the post office and across the street in the church parking lot. And it's where only.
Sorry, didn't
I guess they get it out. the road.
Yeah, it's
The direction.
11 o'clock, so.
We're just trying to determine.
Yes, I like that idea. I guess I say, I've known about the Kayenta issue just from sitting in my famous chair over there. It just totally forgot about it until it was brought up. So to me, I guess I would like to see a list of wants that we haven't been able to achieve.
Internally.
Whether that's a whiteboard or whatever to get my brain focused, since it's only been here in this seat anyway, for 12 weeks or whatever it is. Because I'm sure there's other things like that I haven't thought about.
Well, our fear collectively, I think, is without some kind of process or procedure, it's gonna wind up every Tuesday.
Yeah.
Somebody from the county or someone
Somebody
in the
somewhere is
county
gonna be
is
asking for money.
gonna come forward and say, I got a great idea. And it will be a great idea if you only look at that great idea and not look at the big picture. So what can we do to help the commissioners look at the bigger picture over time to help you make informed decisions?
You know what I want to do? I want to get all of our electeds and department heads all in here for one powwow. And I think this is as close to a powwow as we come, as we come.
Yeah.
We actually, every Tuesday, we have a powwow because you're all are listening on the Zoom anyways, but we're not here.
We see you.
But we do need to, and it would be good so that we can do some of this longer term range planning on finding efficiencies, how we're going to manage this ship moving into the future with the changes in the world has wrought in the last year. And I think that is a good spot. And also doing that, I think one of everybody's homework is you all have great ideas that you may have brought to a previous board and got shot down, but you all have great ideas on things that you can do to make your own little empire better and more efficient. And I want to hear those, and I want to support you guys get there. And those who are listening on the phone, you too. And I think that's one of those ways. So yeah, if everybody comes together with, we've got some money, this is what I could invest it in, and this is how it's going to save me money for the next few years, because when this money is gone, we're gonna be going into a very tight years of, we're getting more efficient to save money so that we're not having to spend more money. We're about to move into a new building. There should be efficiencies there within our interactions. I want to be able to realize those interactions personally. So that's how I would like to see
I would
it.
like to make a special note to all those people coming forward in that meeting to not use the word FTE in whatever they're asking for.
So you want to look internally
One
first.
second.
I want to look internally within the organization of Klickitat County first, have the discussion start there.
Yes.
I would agree too, because when you look at you look at the elected officials and the department heads, that's the whole spectrum of the county.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is the brain trust of the county. I mean, and we've used it as such before. When this is a little different because I guess the analogy I would use is when we were in 2009, 2010, when we were having to make some decisions about how the economy's gone bad and we have to figure out how we're going to survive. That's exactly what we did. Is we got together, we got the band together, and it was ultimately those fiscal decisions were the board's to make, but the board wanted all of that input and hearing from everybody, and there was some great ideas, and there was some, and I think that's an excellent idea. And
So
that's
in terms of
before we go. Because I think because ultimately the dollars that are coming into the county are the county's resources.
Yep.
And if I'm all for involving the community. I mean, I guess as far as on stuff, but there are huge potential things that we can do to support county government that I think we need to hear from the folks that actually manage the government.
So I've heard a few sideboards, and I'm just confirming they exist.
And I will, any program, no future program, this is,
No long term.
this is one-time funding. It
Yeah.
should be for things that are one and done, not ongoing, because if you're just creating a liability in the future, I'm not interested in it.
And that's all
because-
the same with the FTE. I don't want ongoing payroll issues. I want.
I'm just trying to get as much guidance so when we
Things that can
get the
help you.
department heads together, they don't
So-
bring something that's.
So dealing with, because we know as soon as the public gets a hold of it, everybody comes out with their hand up. And so the only way I can think of to stave that off is to say, we're gonna be methodical about our decision-making. But my personal thing would be is we may do something like we used to, the old $300,000, and make a competitive process for people to go through that we'll do one time. And that will be part of our, that outreach. But right now we haven't built it, but it'll probably follow that old. And so I would direct you guys to figure out, how do we get to that process like we used to do the 300,000? Do we have to send that money to Klickitat or however we
You're
got
talking the 300,000 for like the community block grant that
Right.
Yeah.
could be for kids.
You also have the ability,
You
Wow,
want a little
that's
bit of the
amazing.
history?
She does that. Everybody just quiet. I do it. Everybody keeps talking.
You do.
when she says something, we know she
She doesn't say anything very often. so.
oh, well, you're supposed to, then you're in here.
Would you like a little bit of the history of that or pass? I don't care.
Sure, why not?
Like I started over there and, the communities when I got there, they already were well versed in how that worked. But you did send out notices. And so all of your communities, they would get together, whether it was the community council or just a little community group, they worked with their fire districts. And they came up with the best case scenarios with what their little community needed. Then they would come in, and it was the Klickitat, and they would make their presentations. And then the board would consider that, and then that, of course, would come to
They made a recommendation.
you guys to make that final decision, but it was all, staff would have it all listed, with the amounts and all that. That way you guys could decide per their recommendations.
I have a folder in there in my office that's Don Struck's folder from back when that program was still around, and it goes through years.
See, and the beauty of that is if you decided that ultimately decide that's a bucket, and then you put something in that bucket, then staff can come back and say, what is the procedure and process, like Lee's outlined in the past, for that bucket of money? And each bucket may have a different process or procedure to vet out what's the highest and best use of those funds. I also think you have a legitimate legal argument to make for the pinnacle, hold off the small bidders, is there's so much money coming down the path in the next 12 to 18 months that some of these other things will either be dealt with directly through them getting their own money or additional funds being freed up from the county. So, I mean, there's going to be a lot of money coming at us somehow over the next 18 months. So
Your block grant idea was something I was planning on bringing up later with these funds, is if there was a little chunk we could put aside for communities to have, I don't know, a get out of COVID party in their little community, an ice cream social, or something, a little celebratory summer, let's get out of this COVID thing. So just brainstorming, throw that out there. But that could also be part of the same dollars.
So the next step would be to set up a meeting with the elected officials and the department heads at some point. That, again, there's not really a time crunch because
I think understanding that until we get clarity about all these other buckets, you know, it's kind of a preliminary, although we may be able to, maybe we can get some good idea. It's like we've already got, sounds like one good idea, because part of this is again, we're getting half now, a half a year from now. So we can have some discussions about long range kind of stuff, because and I don't know as far as county departments, how, other than, you know, stuff in the road department, there's gonna be some transportation dollars coming in there. And so that might have, you know, it's like, you know, don't ask for gas tax, you know, from this money, because maybe you're gonna get it over here. And so until that all shakes out, but I think, you know, sooner, there's nothing wrong with doing this sooner and get
the ongoing discussion that we've had at the finance committee in here is if we can free up landfill expenses somehow.
Right.
That again is discretionary money the county could use to backfill other things or fund other things. So whatever that may be. So our initial challenge is to find ways to get that into our bucket, the big bucket, from it, you know, and then start having these meetings, or at least have the next meeting to see if we can start determining for you which buckets you would like to
Are
start.
you game in having bring everybody together for a powwow in an afternoon session after the morning session like this?
Sure.
I don't like to do the doubles in a day, but that's a totally different.
Well, no,
That's
and
really not
let me
financial.
clarify, as I did before, I am not opposed to having a meeting that is more than 3 hours long.
No, I'm just saying you said too many numbers
Right.
and that's what I said. Instead of doing
But that's
finance
not,
on both sides
but
of it.
the afternoon powwow is not, we're not gonna be talking
Right.
dollars and
That's
cents.
what I'm
We're not
saying.
gonna be looking at budgets. We're gonna be talking about ideas, big picture stuff,
Right.
which is something I have some aptitude for, even in my old age and decrepitude in the afternoon, so.
Don't read into it more than what was said now.
Bridget, Greg, have you guys?
Madam Auditor.
Madam Auditor. Save it.
I think with your idea, that's great, Jake, and then you could gather from all the departments and electeds what their kind of wish list is. It'd be good if they could bring it in writing for you, so you could have it ahead of time maybe.
Or
and
electronic.
Discuss it. Yeah, well, I'm gonna email it to you, yes, and so you could, before the meeting, and then you would have everybody's ideas. So when you go to set up those buckets, you could make your priorities. Just an idea.
I like it.
I think people should be prepared, maybe more than one meeting. I mean, there's a lot of things to consider and discuss that, you know.
Well,
at the
because
start.
things are gonna change over
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, and the second one is gonna be after 5 o'clock, so we don't have drinks.
Yeah.
You
It's
know,
always
I'm
5
trying to-
o'clock somewhere.
I'm trying to include his
We all
idea
have
for the
drinks.
ice cream social.
Yeah.
as well.
We drinking this
Market
thing.
salad.
It's getting to be margarita season, so.
There you go.
Did it
Margarita
stop
social.
during COVID?
I think that's what Jen and I, and hopefully the finance committee members, where we discussed this, got to where we hope to get.
The margaritas?
Margaritas. Greg or Brenda, do you have any other observations or thoughts or corrections?
Mouth water now.
Stop while we're ahead, or?
No, I think technology is something that I agree with Jake. I mean, we need, and one of the things that's in the center of that is the financial system. And from that, there's a lot of tentacles that go out to other pieces, excuse me, to try to do that. So also, if staff or department heads or elected officials know that that's something that's going to possibly be on the list or a major impact from that you guys are supporting, they may have other things that they may bring forward, because that may in and of itself kind of get everybody working along the lines with that. That's just a huge tool we all use here. I mean, if ever, and I think that's a good start.
I'd just like to thank Brenda and Greg on behalf of Jen and I for all the help. As you see, the finances in this county are complicated, and it takes more than one or two people to do it. I mean, statutorily, you got revenue and expenditures, and then dozens and dozens of other people. We do the budget on your behalf that are involved daily, weekly, and monthly in the fiscal process. So it's very complicated. And I'd like to just conclude by saying I'm thankful every day Jen has joined us in this current role, and
I would echo that.
I think she's doing a great job, and it's a pleasure to work with her. So
Well, even whenever.
I want to find her seat.
you want to find your feet? We'll work on that.
Well, I don't know, I think we should, because she came to my office to start with. She wasn't in the county till she came to me, so maybe I should get the financial.
Every good decision has many.
Well, or we could just say it was long-term planning. We had to put her in each different department so that she understood the entire budget, so that when she took the role, it was all there.
However she got here, I'm glad she's here.
So am I.
And I'm glad to have Brendan and Greg.
You just might have to give her a window seat in the new building. She was complaining earlier about not having a window.
I wasn't
I heard.
Boy, we just, the balloon went right off the road.
Somebody came into my office and said I had the best office. I said, well.
No, you can swap with her.
We're gonna stop while we're
The
ahead.
only other one-time thing I can think of is we need to put a deck on the roof up there and a barbecue,
That's nice.
I agree,
okay? I don't know,
and I'll be in this
It's gonna
building.
be really hot.
and I would,
It's really white up there right now. Or it
well,
will
we
be.
could put some plants and stuff
Yeah.
around.
Some palm trees and whatnot.
I like
But-
your thinking.
Maybe
But I-
employees jumping at that point.
Since we didn't get a workout room like most
No.
corporate places, we need a deck and a barbecue. And a margarita machine.
Yeah.
The negative to that is I'm betting
I know we
if
said
there's
that
a
for
lot
you.
of footsteps. I like the margarita machine thing. If there's a lot of footsteps on the roof, you might wear and tear your roof more.
That's why I said put a deck on
They
it.
said you'd have to put a rail and keep people from going on the other side.
Thank you, commissioners, for your time. We appreciate, we hope we've given you as much information as we know as of today. It may change by next time we talk to you, but Jen is doing a fantastic job of tracking this, and I know she'll keep us up to date.
I know tracking for us internally is great, what we're getting, but tracking what everybody else is getting too, so that we can tell the PUD when they come in, well, you guys have this much dollars is what it's showing that you have access to. Why are you asking us?
Well, that's
So
kind of
they-
what I was
That.
So,
saying with their other programs, or the city, if they come asking what money they're getting.
PUD has called me a few times and they have it, and I've tried to figure out what the shortfalls are, what the issue is, because it, just like you, I was like, well, all this money is going out for utility assistance. And so I'm thinking that part of the problem is maybe some people are falling through the cracks. People who are, there you got a group of people who are not used to having to get assistance. Maybe they don't know the process. Maybe WAGAP is, held to certain income limitations, and these people had their arrears is from months ago, but now they're working again, and so now they're above the income level. I don't know, this is my assumption, but maybe those things play a part in it all. As of Monday, they asked that we don't forget about them. So
Kind of hard when they're calling.
You can transfer.
They are
to my
calling
phone
me.
if you want.
But she does bring up a good point. I actually saw it on the Portland News the other day about a business owner who didn't meet all the criteria, because government tends to use the same criteria in terms of poverty and economics, and there's a lot of, that we call a lot of folks that, the working poor or the middle income for housing, the working housing, so they don't fit the boxes that the government is set up in terms of income and so they're the ones falling through the cracks, I think, generally everywhere, whether it be a business or an individual or a household.
And keep in mind that all of this money is flowing through WAGAP. How many people do they employ? I have no clue. I mean, are they overwhelmed?
How are we doing on the housing money that's going through your board over there with rent or people that are behind on their rent and house payments and all that stuff? It's a couple million. Is it seeing enough to actually be able to use all those funds, or?
I suspect before it's all done, yeah. I mean, there's the Housing Resource Center is busy and they've staffed. I think they've added another staff person just because of the volume of.
There's got to be a ton of people that don't know that's available.
I'm
There's
sure
probably
they
a ton that don't know that the power thing is available.
I'm partner, so being with the EOC, I am asking that the EOC PIO is doing press releases of the funding that's available. So she's also, Michelle Maroney, so she's also been working with Dave to make sure that stuff for businesses is out there as well.
Right. I mean, we're trying to get, I think, through various channels to get our messages out to folks. But ultimately it is up to individuals to seek out what help they need, what's out there. I'm not going to go door to door and tell people about what's available out there. Madam Clerk.
Would it be beneficial to ask Leslie to come back and give a more in-depth report of what WAGAP does and how they do it?
She kind of did.
Well,
I can talk to her beforehand,
Okay.
not put her in a public setting, just
Sure.
to see how, in terms of the workload and that kind of stuff, and see if they are experiencing.
I suspect they are, as far as it's and they may be having some management, because if you're a relatively small agency and then you add staff, all this stuff, there's not everything scales up. If we took a department here that normally has 9 employees and now it's 29 employees, there's some growing pains that come with that.
And systems
And all that stuff.
And that,
So it wouldn't be, I don't know that, but that would just be an outside observation that I'm not surprised if they don't have some growing pains.
I would almost expect it.
Yeah, I would too. As far as timing wise, our next workshop schedule, is the afternoon clear or not? As far as to get the
Morning topic, right?
afternoon.
the morning topic on the 15th is
Yeah.
8:35 to 10, and it's the fund scheme and then the background of descriptions and going through the detailed parts of the funds and the minimum balances and really diving into each fund specifically. And I believe that the afternoon on the schedule was available, but Lee would be the expert.
And then we have Board of Health in the
You
middle.
did have like 1 to 3 as well.
Yeah.
Right, okay, it's not filled up, so.
Well,
Yeah, so that would be
It's
good.
blocked out for
It's
us.
blocked out, yes.
It's
Well,
blocked
yeah,
out.
I just didn't know if we were gonna cancel it like we did today and just do one morning thing.
This is not letting go of that.
Or are we thinking about doing,
You're taking it wrong.
checking in with most of our department heads to see if we want to have a powwow that afternoon? We want to
Right.
bring their ideas.
Right. Is that do we think that's 2 weeks from now? Is that enough time to give people notice for them to be thinking about their ideas?
I mean, I think the discussion needs to happen. It may not just be one discussion.
No, it is, but I think that's
I think
adequate.
it's
I think
adequate.
2 weeks notice to say, hey, come with your
And in
ideas.
2 weeks, some of the rules are gonna change. I mean, that's the
Right.
problem. This is so fluid that,
Right, we can have the introductory
but I think we
conversation.
need to have it sooner rather than later, so people are thinking. And even, and I don't think you guys are gonna wanna say, okay, boy, that's it right there. I think you guys are wanting.
This was your one time.
And I
Sorry,
think
that's it.
prompting discussion is
Don't
gonna
call
be
in
good,
sick
because that may add other things that people need to go back and add for a later meeting.
How many so I'm just trying to think.
How many
Fit everybody.
fit anybody in here?
Technically, no. If you measure 6 feet between, you can maybe get 6.
Can we call it a school for a day and go to 3 feet between?
Yeah.
It is an education.
I'm gonna have Jen attend that too. I think it's, just makes
Oh,
sense to
yeah,
have her listen to that, and be part of that discussion
Do we,
It's gonna
if
be
we don't have,
by
could
degrees and
could we go,
going
across to our new building and use our new venue?
Go for the road.
That's pretty
Well,
bright.
the other question is would there be a possibility to use the building, is there facilities at the fairgrounds that have a big enough meeting room? But I don't know about the phone or stuff. I
Well,
don't
you're
know
gonna
how that
have,
would
you'd
work.
have 20+ people in there, and you still have to be 6 feet apart, and I don't know the square footage of the building, but it can be checked out.
It's very big. I mean, Public
It is.
Works had their staff meetings in there and, I mean, they had quite a few people.
Mostly full of PPE, but
I haven't been in that end of it.
Say, if we go off-site, I personally am not pushing the Zoom and recording and all that kind of stuff if we're not on-site.
There's really no way to do it
Right.
unless there's electricity and.
It's just, it makes, because then you're too far apart and you can't hear the person in the back on the Zoom, so I have it. So, I mean, if we want to go off-site, I'm fine with that, and I don't.
Well, I think
Zooming
I would be,
off-site.
I would be fine as far as if we're doing, because this really is gonna be a workshop with electeds and department heads. It's not a regular meeting on Tuesday, and if we go off-site, we don't have capability, we don't.
Right.
We would have to advertise where it's gonna be. It would be open to the public if they wanted to come. Again, understanding, we're gonna reserve capacity for the participants. That's kind of the whole point of us getting together. So yeah, if you can, invite our elected officials and direct our directors.
see, you guys, see,
That's how that's done. It is, there's a difference. All I can do is ask.
we'd like you there.
We'd
you'll be
like
there.
you there, you be there
So that's in the afternoon of the 15th.
on the 15th.
Now, is that after, so it'll be like 3 o'clock,
No, 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock?
So we'll
Okay.
do the morning here
Yeah.
with
Board of
the,
Health.
and the Board of-
lunch,
yeah.
And
and
then,
then lunch, and then we'll go out to the fairgrounds if we can find a space.
We can potentially use, never mind, that's the wrong, I was gonna say the PUD, but.
I might not be allowed to build it.
I thought that's where
Or-
people-
If that's
I
nice,
think
it's
there's
so
a-
random.
I think there's a lot of room in that one.
No, they.
But it's not
Yeah.
difficult.
This is retrofitted.
Most of our phones, we could, use iPads. If we still want to put it on Zoom, you could log in and we could then just record it that way.
Right.
And have something.
I'm sure give it a whirl.
We can, I mean, with the
But
intent that
unfortunately-
it may work and it may not work.
Unfortunately, those are the meetings the public tends to think are non-transparent.
Right.
I mean, so, because it's different than the regular stuff, so.
So I
We'll
will say
figure it out.
that on the 15th, I won't be there in the morning because Mike has an appointment for his arm that he's been nursing for
Right.
2 months. So that kind of trumps work this time.
But that room is set up for the EOC. I mean, that's what it was, heating and cooling. So it may
Right.
be wired for the EOC in terms of phone jacks and all.
Yeah, it's an
We can
improved
check.
space. I don't think we were quite done
Thinking
with it,
that-
but
yeah.
you don't think you
What
had.
is that?
I think it was just, yeah.
They put it in there.
I don't know.
Well, what did
That's a
you
boring
use?
question.
What
Well,
part
we were
did you?
not in the room that we were in. We were in.
But you must have had,
And then there was the weed department, and then there's the rest of that, and they actually went back and redid the HVAC and everything.
No, I'm talking about plugs.
plug as far as the
Talking about
internet.
Oh,
and-
okay.
Five and
I mean, I know that the Wi-Fi up there, or the internet, or the wireless network, sorry, was solid, and I know they
Oh,
upped
well.
the.
Well, we're set
capacity
then,
since-
we can do
And
it.
they've upped the capacity since we were there. It worked when we were there, but they made it, there's more bandwidth as well.
Okay.
so.
All right.
Again, I haven't been up there for
Okay,
a while.
so if we're putting the band together, we want to be very pointed in what we want the band to bring in terms of their ideas. And that we
Or
want,
pre-submit.
and we want the pre-submission so that I can read it all ahead of time.
And this is, I give more information as far as exactly what you're looking for them to bring.
Yeah, that's kind of
With
where.
their
I was going.
ideas.
One-time funding opportunity.
One-time funding
Funding
opportunities for the use.
Some
of
will know what
the-
it's gonna cost, some may
To help
not know what it's
efficiency.
gonna cost. They
Yeah.
just- what they
In,
want.
in
No
Oh,
estimates on
ongoing
cost
liabilities.
and prioritize your prioritized list.
And an idea of how it's gonna increase efficiency and, with really a focus on increased efficiency, not additional service.
Right, with an underline of one time.
Yes.
Folded under.
Both
We have are not on that one.
We'll do it.
Okay, sounds
fun.
We'll work early and make sure that.
Make sure I'm not doing-
Yeah, wait, let's actually, let me look. Now that I said that,
Oh, we have the radio that morning too.
well, then I know I'm here.
Thank you again.
Oh, and April 15th is a special day.
No, they
Not
moved
anymore.
it May 17th
I know,
now.
none of it matters.
None of it matters.
What did they move?
Tax
Taxes.
day.
Oh,
Pay when you can.
Just pay when you
Pay when you can. I don't think they've moved to that point yet.
I don't think that bill's passed the Washington State House yet, has it?
But pay when you can.
Or
I hope not. We're on our property tax.
Yeah, no, we were successful to potentially get a amendment to the bill to get Wastock, DOT, Washington DOT to just have to work with every county, because that was gonna open up. So
Yeah.
they were successful with that, and the other one, no, has not, but it's definitely moving that direction.
and did you open up your pay as you break out your payment this year again?
We did not.
Okay.
But we have on our website, I mean, our thing has always been, if you are having problems with your creditors,
Come
any
talk to us.
creditor, and you are a business, you need to reach out to your creditors. There's some responsibility of the taxpayers and the business owners to go out and try, because, I mean, if you can't pay your taxes, call us and we have done traditionally delinquent tax payments forever. But we would do whatever we can. So we haven't opened that up, but we're like, I mean, if people are having trouble or there's a problem, we want those folks to reach out to the treasurer's office and we'll do what we can. But we don't have a lot of people calling us right now saying, oh my gosh, this is horrible. We don't want to put a program in place that, we didn't have that many. I mean, we had a lot, but we didn't have that many last year. I mean, we had, I want to say it was like under 100 or something, so as many people as we had, so. But we haven't, so we didn't do that. And most counties haven't done that either. Most of them have kind of stayed with the whole piece of, contacting us. So if you know of folks, have them call our office and we'll deal with it.
Lastly, thoughts in terms of potentially some of this money, kind of where he was going with that get-together group, party. I think of it more in terms of getting a whole bunch of volunteers together to beautify their community, and we come up with the funds to pay for the paint, and trying to think of a way that we can get those dollars out there to get people to come together as a community to do things that are going to add value, whether it's, we could call it part of the tourist dollars or whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But ways that volunteers, and we'll provide the materials, you provide the labor.
are you talking like a cleanup, planting flowers, removing trash, or are you talking whatever they come up with?
Whatever they come up with, let them come up with, I mean, we always talk about Golden Dale, and I specifically think of Golden Dale because White Salmon does a pretty good job of that.
It's pretty pretty over there.
Yeah,
But
and
we
that
gotta
always,
get this community, buying into
Right.
making their community better.
right, and that was always, in the old days of the community development grants, the top funded projects were like, we were really good about buying the materials, and the community comes together, because it was a way of leveraging. We had more trouble when it was like, oh, we want this and we just want you to write a check for it, and we'll tell them where to put things. And it's like, that's fine, but this community over here just asked for materials and they'll build a fire station. We were like, okay, here, we'll buy all the materials. And
I think that's another, so first, yes. Second, Jen is, I've been doing this a long time, yes.
yeah,
And second is, Jen is what? Heck, at least one city manager didn't even know they were gonna get money.
right.
So since Jen's kind of plugged into what the cities are thinking and will be, if that's something they're gonna do, then would the county money maximize that to a higher level, or would it say, well, if you're gonna do it, we'll put the funds over here? So my point being, as we learn what other entities with their money are going to do, then we'll know whether that is expanding or replacing or paying for. So we're not doing the same thing they may be doing. So there's no yes, but just yes.
Just yes.
And we'll
Yeah.
we'll keep track of it.
Pounding around in the
Yep,
head on
yep.
how we get it, because it's one thing, because I remember the hard thing is always who's gonna hold the cash and pay for it.
Right.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
May just want a sign or something, welcome to things. Who knows what.
communities want.
I
Yeah.
hope for more than that.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. That, I mean, I'll say one thing, I mean, it's not, this money wouldn't be that way, but one thing I did like, like with our, $0.09 that, flow through the recommendation from the Klickitat.
Right.
It was only, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago that we actually came up with a scoring criteria, because it really was, I know Jake was at the meet, that was a very long, because we had to decide how are we, because before it was like, oh, you come in, oh, we like you, oh, okay, that'll be our recommendation. And we started having, if we had multiple requests, it's like, well, how do we need some objective scoring criteria for how we fund things. And so we did the hard work and had a big old brawl over, how we weighted things and the different things that we came up, which is what we still use now, is that it gets through there, you end up with a score. Each of the members goes and scores the project, whatever it is, and if it meets a certain threshold, it will recommend it to the board to get funded, and if it doesn't, sorry, it doesn't meet the criteria.
Now, if we're doing some kind of community grantee, whatever, like you're talking about, do we have to go through Klickitat to do all that, or can they present it to us? It ain't the same dollars. I don't know why we would have to go through Klickitat for that.
I think you were just saying that they used a process. maybe
Right,
we
right,
could
they
use,
use.
Yeah.
I mean, I would rather keep that in-house here personally, but.
Well, the ultimate though is that it always comes here, is that all Klickitat does is make a recommendation. And the board is on Klickitat. And so the idea being that the Klickitat is a whole broad spectrum across the whole county of various interests and the cities and everybody. And it's just sort of like, it's kind of a body to kind of sort of do the heavy lifting as far as, and it makes it fairer. So whether we have to do that, I don't know that we have to. We can set up our own if we wanted, but there is a wheel that's already been
There,
it's already been built and used.
Well, the
So
reality is you're picking.
I guess I'd like to understand what your concern or what your thoughts are on that, because I'm truly interested as far as why you think that
Well, no,
process wouldn't work, or.
Well, I just didn't know that we needed to go through an extra step, but if you guys think we need to go through that extra step, then fine. I don't have a concern or a problem with it.
Well, and I would say too, is the communities are used to,
They were used to it.
they were used to it for 15 years that it did, and it's been discontinued now for 8 or 9 years, that process, but there's many of those people are still around, and it was a pretty well regulated, well thought out process that we use.
The reality is that the good news is you have funds that you can decide what to do with. The other side of that is at some point you're picking winners and losers.
Right.
Of who gets funded, who doesn't, and having some kind of process or safe harbor to the basis for those decisions sometimes goes over better.
Right. Well, because it's independent. I mean, it's all done in public as far as it's transparent. And I was always very impressed with the board members of that organization that really did weigh, regional parity, different communities, where's the dollars going, where they tried to really, because there was members from the whole county. And it wasn't just like, oh, if you give me this, I'll give you that. It wasn't that at all. There were times where communities were told no, because it either was not a good project or there was something that had a higher need somewhere else. And the board, and it was generally even the member that maybe was from that community saw that and they said, yeah, that's a better use of the dollars.
A lot of those old things, looking at the past books and what they were, a lot of them were fire departments.
Sure.
at the end, it was
And
almost,
I guess I would say my hope for these community dollars are for more of a community beautification, community get together, and not for the fire department. So I guess I'd say that's where I was leaning on the whole thing.
And I would say there, this is not the same money. So I think there could be guidance given from the board to Klickitat
Right.
as to this are the priorities that we want, and we want you to vet projects with that in mind.
And when you send the invite out, say this is what we're looking.
This is what we're looking for, right? And they'll do it.
And if you want more beautification, you can earmark some of that money into a fund to do nuisance cleanup. But that's all their story. Because long
I'd
term,
not
I would
consider
like
that.
a fund set up for nuisance. Now, we can't take landfill dollars because those are already spent every year before we get them. They're already earmarked for other things, but as we.
You can reprioritize them.
Right, but I'm just thinking as we develop new funding sources, i.e. solar panels, pump storage, whatever, it would be nice to earmark those into a fund for nuisance abatement cleanup. So we don't, because that's the hardest part of nuisance as far as I'm concerned is, okay, we got to clean this up and where are we going to pay for it and where are we going to get the money? Let's funnel the money in there at the start of the year and then we know how much money we have to spend throughout the year to actually do the work. So just an idea.
Good discussion, thank you.
Okay, anything else before we, from my elected partners out there? No?
We've covered everything that I have.
I have something else I'd like to talk to you about later, but not.
Oh, just me personally?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It's
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
5 minutes.
Okay, could do that. Anything else up here? No? We're good?
No, good meeting today. I like.
Okay, thank you. We'll adjourn and be on our way.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Thank
Have
you,
a
Jen. Thanks
discussion with
for
the auditor.
Thank you.